Mobius chair Wally West is basically what happens when you take one of DC's fastest characters and give him access to one of the most powerful knowledge machines in existence. This version appears in Flash Forward after Wally has gone through some of the worst trauma of his life, especially after the events of Heroes in Crisis. He gets recruited by Tempest Fusionist to clean up dark matter contamination spreading from the dark multiverse. Eventually Wally discovers that his children, Jay and Irie, are trapped in a damaged reality, and the only way to save them and repair the timeline is to sit on the Mobius chair, the ancient cosmic vehicle once used by Metron. The chair already has a connection to Dr. Manhattan's energy from Doomsday Clock, so when Wally sits down, all three powers basically collide. The Mobius chair gives Wally access to practically unlimited knowledge, letting him perceive events across timelines, dimensions, and hypertime. His Speed Force connection remains intact, so he can combine that insane speed with the chair's dimensional abilities. Then Manhattan's residual energy gets absorbed into him, turning his suit blue and giving him the familiar Manhattan symbol on his forehead. With all of that combined, Wally can manipulate matter, time, space, and laws of physics, create planets and entire realms from energy, repair damaged timelines, and even exist across multiple points in history at once. He also becomes capable of moving on a level where ordinary concepts like distance and conventional speed barely mean anything. Basically, you're talking Wally's speed plus the chair's cosmic knowledge plus Dr. Manhattan's reality manipulation and putting them inside one person. Of course, DC wasn't going to let Wally keep that forever. During Dark Knight's Death Metal, the Batman who laughs realizes just how dangerous Wally has become and manipulates him into performing a massive multiversal realignment. The process allows the Batman who laughs to siphon the accumulated crisis energy from Wally and use it to transform himself into the Darkest Knight. Wally loses the Mobius chair and Manhattan's power, returning to his normal Speed Force connection. Anti-Crisis Wonder Woman, also called Golden Wonder Woman, is Diana at one of her most absurdly powerful points ever. She reaches this form during the climax of Dark Knight's Death Metal, when the Darkest Knight has taken over creation, and even the hero's attempts to fight back with Crisis energy are making him stronger. Diana realizes they need the opposite of Crisis energy, and that's Anti-Crisis energy, which represents memory, truth, history, and keeping the different parts of DC's reality connected instead of constantly destroying and resetting them. She travels to the World Forge, melts her lasso of truth together with Change Metal aka Element X, and absorbs the Anti-Crisis power generated from the collective history and memories of the DC universe. She emerges as this enormous golden cosmic version of Wonder Woman, complete with her bizarre but awesome chainsaw of truth. At this point, Diana's powers go way beyond her normal Amazon abilities. The Anti-Crisis energy essentially turns her into an embodiment of truth and continuity, allowing her to cut through the Darkest Knight's reality manipulation and undo his attempts to rewrite creation. And the Darkest Knight is ridiculously powerful by this point. He had already defeated Perpetua and absorbed her multiversal power. Diana still manages to fight him across the edges of creation before dragging him into the First Sun, the primordial source at the beginning of creation, where she destroys him. Her biggest feat comes immediately afterward. The battle has left reality on the verge of collapsing, so Diana uses the Anti-Crisis energy to rebuild and expand existence into the Omniverse, restoring the countless histories, timelines, and realities that had been erased or rewritten. After saving everything, Diana basically gets promoted to the cosmic VIP section of DC. The Hands, they are beings existing beyond the normal multiverse who are responsible for creating multiverses, recognize what she has accomplished and invite her to join them as a guardian of creation. But Diana doesn't want to sit above reality like some distant cosmic deity. She wants to be with the people she spent her entire life protecting, so she returns to Earth during the Infinite Frontier era and gives up her giant golden god form. So standard Wonder Woman is already a ridiculous powerhouse who can fight Superman level beings and gods, while Anti-Crisis Wonder Woman briefly becomes a cosmic force capable of defeating the Darkest Knight and literally rebuilding DC's reality into the Omniverse. So imagine the Joker, already one of the most unpredictable chaotic villains in comics, suddenly getting the power of a god. That's Emperor Joker. The story comes from Superman Emperor Joker in 2000, where Joker manages to trick Mr. Mxyzptlk, the fifth dimensional imp, into giving him 99% of his reality wrapping power. If Mixie is basically a cartoon god who can rewrite reality on a whim, then Joker with that power is like giving a chainsaw to a toddler. With those powers, Joker remakes existence in his image. He tortures and kills Batman literally every single night, only to resurrect him each morning so he can do it again. Superman becomes the universe's main prisoner, forced to wander through Joker's demented reality where nothing makes sense. Heroes and villains are wrapped into grotesque parodies of themselves, and all of creation basically runs on Joker's insane sense of humor. The scariest part about Emperor Joker is how he uses his power. Mix's pet leg might wrap reality, but at least he does it for mischief or curiosity. Joker uses it for sadism, for the sake of his own amusement, and to indulge his obsession with Batman. That endless loop of torturing Batman shows just how broken Joker is, even when he has the power to do literally anything. With infinite possibilities at his fingerprints, all he can think about is making Batman suffer forever. That's Joker in a nutshell. Superman, of course, is the one who ends up standing against him, but even Superman, who has beaten gods and cosmic monsters, is out of his league here. Emperor Joker can unmake Superman with a thought. The only way the heroes win is through Joker's one fatal flaw, his obsession with Batman, by banking on Joker's inability to ever truly kill Batman, because deep down, Joker needs him. So they exploit that weakness and trick Joker into losing control of the god powers. What makes Emperor Joker such a great ultimate form is that he embodies the full nightmare of Joker's character, his chaos unchecked, cruelty given infinite scope, and obsession raised to cosmic proportions. He takes everything terrifying about him as a street-level villain and magnifies it until the entire multiverse is his playground. He doesn't want to rule or create, he just wants to break and mock everything, forever. It's funny to him. Unlike characters like Spectre or Darkseid, his powers doesn't come with a grand philosophy or a cosmic plan. It's just Joker with no limits, reshaping existence as a sick joke, and the fact that even Mr. Mix's pet leg was afraid of what he unleashed tells you everything. Kylo Rayner reached a completely different level when he became a White Lantern in Green Lantern New Guardians issue 16. This happened after the Guardians unleashed the Third Army, an army designed to strip the universe of emotion and free will. Kylo realized that simply mastering willpower wasn't enough, so he went through the entire emotional spectrum, mastering rage, avarice, fear, willpower, hope, compassion, and love. By experiencing all 7 emotions simultaneously, Kyle created a White Lantern ring from his own soul. That gave him access to the entire emotional spectrum and connected him directly to the life entity, the source of life itself. White Lantern Kyle could basically combine the abilities of every Lantern Corps at once. He could use Red Lantern Rage, Blue Lantern Healing, Indigo Teleportation, and the abilities of the other corps, while still having his Green Lantern constructs. His powers also went far beyond normal, hard-light creations. He could create actual living matter, restore damaged ecosystems, resurrected worlds, and regenerate life that had been completely wiped out. His biggest upgrade came when he confronted Relic and entered the source wall, surviving something that had historically killed or trapped beings who tried to cross it. Kyle even pulled the life equation from the source itself. The life equation is essentially the opposite of Darkseid's anti-life equation, where anti-life represents submission and the idea that existence has no meaning. The life equation represents the value of life and gives its wielder the ability to affect reality, matter, and souls. And Kyle actually had the power to back all of this up. During Godhead, Highfather and the New Gods wanted the life equation for themselves so they could use it against Darkseid, but Kyle was able to stand against the forces of Genesis. He also defeated or contained Relic, an entity from the universe that existed before the current DC multiverse, while restoring the emotional spectrum. The problem was that having this much power made Kyle less and less like a normal human being, while basically turning him into a cosmic target. Eventually, during an attempt to restore the destroyed Blue Lantern Corps, the enormous amount of power caused his White Lantern ring to split into 7 separate rings that scattered across the galaxy. Kyle lost the white light and life equation and eventually returned to being a Green Lantern. The God of Knowledge. When Darkseid War kicked off, every Justice Leaguer got thrown into insane power-ups. Batman's upgrade was one of the most fitting and the most dangerous. During the chaos, he takes control of Metron's Mobius chair. It's a cosmic artifact built by the New Gods that holds infinite knowledge across time and space. Once Bruce sits in it, he instantly becomes the God of Knowledge, armed with answers to every mystery in the universe. The first thing Bruce does, he tests it. Classic Batman move. He asks the Mobius chair who killed his parents, and it confirms Joe Chill, which he already knew, but then he pushes harder, asking who the Joker really is. The answer shakes him to his core, because the chair tells him there are 3 Jokers. That little bombshell set up years of storytelling, including Batman 3 Jokers. That's how dangerous this new knowledge is. Instead of giving Batman peace, it gives him more questions, more paranoia, more weight to carry. Don't get me wrong, as the God of Knowledge, Batman doesn't just know facts. He can see events across time, anticipate outcomes, and understand sense the multiverse's deepest mechanics. For once, Bruce doesn't need to investigate, chase leads, or piece things together. The answers just flood into him, and instead of being overwhelmed, he uses them. He manipulates criminals before they strike, steers the league through cosmic level problems, and even stares down gods with total confidence. But of course, there's a dark side. The Mobius chair isn't just a database, it's a trap. The more you use it, the more it fuses with you, turning you into a cold, detached being like Metron himself. And that's the danger for Batman. His greatest strength is his humanity, his ability to feel, to empathize, to stay grounded even while obsessing over justice. As the god of knowledge, he risks losing that. You see glimpses of it in the way he starts talking down to his teammates, more calculating, less compassionate, almost machine-like. The conflict makes this form so interesting. On the one hand, Batman with infinite knowledge seems like the most unstoppable strategist in the DC universe. On the other hand, it's not sustainable. Bruce isn't meant to be an actual god. He's meant to be a man standing among gods. The Mobius chair tempts him with ultimate control, but it also strips away the core of what makes him Batman. Even when he uses its knowledge to save lives, you can tell it's eating away at him bit by bit. Batman eventually has to give up the chair because staying in it would mean losing himself. But the god of knowledge form leaves a permanent mark on his mythos. If Batman had the answers to everything, he could run the universe. But knowing everything isn't the same as understanding everything. So for one arc, we got to see the scariest what if of all. Batman not just as the world's greatest detective, but as the universe's. Deathstroke is normally terrifying because he's an insanely skilled assassin with a genius-level tactical mind. But DC has given Slade a couple of power-ups that push him way beyond his usual level. The first is God Killer Deathstroke. From the New 52's Deathstroke, issue 7 to issue 10. The Greek god of Forge hires Slade to kill the immortal titan, Lapithus, so he creates a weapon specifically for him, the God Killer. The sword can absorb kinetic and magical attacks and send them back at twice the original strength, change itself into different weapons or armor, and even act independently by guiding Slade's movements. With it, Slade can fight divine beings, survive attacks that should destroy a normal human, slaughter mythological creatures, and eventually decapitate Lapithus himself. He even fights Wonder Woman to a standstill, with the sword absorbing her divine attacks and returning them with amplified force. Then there's Speed Force Deathstroke from Lazarus Contract. Slade becomes obsessed with changing history after the death of his own son Grant, so he decides that the only way to save him is to go back in time. He first traps Kid Flash and siphons away his Speed Force connection. But when that isn't enough, he targets Wally West and manages to directly bond himself to the Speed Force. Suddenly you are taking Deathstroke's tactical brain and putting it inside someone who can move through time. His accelerated mind lets him process events at absurd speeds, anticipate the Titan's movements before they even make them, and race backward through history, while creating temporal paradoxes that threaten to tear apart the timeline. Eventually, Wally manages to disrupt Slade's connection and stop him from completely wrecking the timeline. But while trapped within the temporal stream, Slade essentially experiences existence on a cosmic scale and comes out realizing how meaningless his endless cycle of killing has become. He drops his weapons and mask and declares that Deathstroke is dead, temporarily walking away from his life as an assassin before eventually becoming involved with Defiance. So you basically have two completely different god tier versions of Slade. God Killer Deathstroke, who uses a divine weapon to fight titans and gods, and Speed Force Deathstroke, who turns his tactical genius into a time-traveling supercomputer capable of messing with the timeline itself. Furnace. He is what happens when you take John Jones, strip away his humanity, and unleash the ancient, primal fire that all Martians were designed to keep buried. Normally, John is this calm, thoughtful presence on the Justice League, the heart of the team even. But in JLA, issue 84 to issue 89, Trial by Fire, DC revealed that the Martians we know aren't their true selves. They were physically engineered by their gods to be weak to fire as a failsafe, because their original forms, the burning Martians, were violent, destructive conquerors. When John loses that psychic block, he reverts to his original state and becomes Furnace. As Furnace, he transforms into a towering, flaming monster with no trace of his old morals. His powers are basically John's or the insane list, like super strength, shape-shifting, telepathy, invisibility, intangibility, regeneration, all dialed up to 11 and fused with fire-based abilities. He can literally burn minds with his telepathy, and his flames are part of the burning Martian's essence, something even gods fear. The Justice League is completely out of their depth against Furnace. Superman, Wonder Woman, and Flash all get wrecked, and even heavy hitters like Green Lantern can't hold him. He's not powerful physically. His telepathy is so overwhelming that he can mind wipe whole cities in seconds. Remember how Martian Manhunter is already considered one of the most broken leaguers? Furnace is that, but without compassion, restraint, or a shred of empathy. He's not a possessed John or some evil clone. He is John, just stripped back to his original Martian nature. That raises the terrifying implication that all Martians could become like this if their genetic fire weakness fails. Of course, this being comics, there's always a way out. Plastic Man ends up playing a critical role in stopping Furnace, since his mind and body are immune to Furnace's telepathy and fire. And eventually John is restored, but the trauma of what he became and what his people really were lingers. Furnace stands out as one of DC's most terrifying ultimate forms. He's not cosmic like Cosmic Armor Superman or magical like Witchmark Diana. He's pure primal evolution, the version of Martian Manhunter that never learned compassion, never restrained himself, and never became a hero. Imagine putting on the helmet of fate and suddenly realizing you're not really in charge anymore. That's basically what happens when Nabu, one of the ancient lords of order, completely takes over Dr. Fate. Nabu is a cosmic being, billions of years old. And when he's fully unleashed, he doesn't think like a human anymore. He sees emotion, free will, and chaos as problems that need to be corrected. The Helmet of Fate connects him to the mortal world, while the Cloak of Destiny gives Fate insane durability, speed, flight, and strength. The Amulet of Anubis provides its own pocket dimension and massive magical abilities, and the Orb of Nabu lets him perceive events across timelines and dimensions. At that point, you're basically looking at Nabu wearing Dr. Fate as a costume, and Nabu has the feats to back it up. During Day of Vengeance, the Spectre was going around destroying magic across creation, even taking down the Rock of Eternity and killing the wizard Shazam. Nabu stepped up and fought him directly, holding his own long enough to force the presence to intervene after Nabu was finally struck down. He's also opened portals into the 6th dimension, even while weakened, created magical barriers capable of locking away higher dimensional beings, and repeatedly defeated monsters like Mordro, one of the strongest Lords of Chaos. In Justice League Dark, things get even crazier after the Source Wall falls. Nabu decides that magic itself is basically a mistake because it's too chaotic, takes complete control of Kent Nelson, and teams up with the other Lords of Order to remove magic from reality. He even creates the other place and seals off entire avenues of divine magic while remaining aware of threats coming from beyond the dark multiverse. The problem is that Nabu takes order way too seriously. If everything is perfectly controlled, nothing can change, grow, or even have real free will anymore. So Wonder Woman, Zatanna, Khalid Nasor, and the others have to stop him from turning reality into one giant perfectly organized prison. Eventually, human creativity and the chaotic nature of magic are combined with Nabu's order, allowing Kent and Khalid to pull him back from complete control. And that's what makes this version of Dr. Fate so ridiculous. Lord of Order Dr. Fate is basically Nabu himself, operating without the human brakes. You're not dealing with a superhero anymore. You are dealing with a cosmic force that genuinely believes the universe would be better if everyone stopped having free will. Witchmarked. This version comes from Justice League Dark in 2018, when magic itself in the DC universe starts collapsing. Long story short, Hecate, the ancient goddess of magic, reveals that Diana has been carrying a hidden brand her whole life. This mark wasn't just a tattoo, it was a literal bomb of raw, chaotic magic waiting to go off. When Hecate activates it, Wonder Woman becomes one of her witchmark, and everything about Diana changes. The witchmark transformation turns Wonder Woman into a towering, terrifying magical being. She sprouts glowing horns, her eyes blaze with eldritch fire, and her body becomes covered with glowing runes and magical energy. In this form, she is basically a walking conduit of primordial chaos magic, wielding power way beyond her Amazonian gifts. It's not just Wonder Woman with spells, it's like Hecate rewrites her into a magical nuke that can tear through gods, demons, and dimensions without even trying. The catch though is that the witch-marked state isn't Diana fully in control. It's Hecate using her as a pawn, bending her heroic nature into something destructive. Wonder Woman is fighting a battle on two levels, physically unleashing all this apocalyptic magic, but also mentally trying to resist Hecate's influence. So this isn't just about her strength, but about her willpower to remain herself while carrying the burden of god-level chaos magic inside her. One of the coolest things about Witchmark Diana is how it highlights her connection to magic in a way we don't usually see. Wonder Woman has always been tied to gods, myth, and enchanted weapons like the Lasso of Truth, but Witchmark pushes her into territory closer to Zatanna or Dr. Fate, except she's got raw magical muscle instead of spells and incantations. Witchmarked also ramps up the stakes for Justice League Dark. Characters like Constantine and Zatanna are freaking out, because if Diana, the heart of the League, gets fully consumed by Hecate, she could literally unravel reality. It puts her friends in a brutal position. Do they fight to save her or fight to stop her? And of course, being Wonder Woman, she's the one who finds the inner strength to break through Hecate's control. And to this day, this form is still one of her scariest and the most visually striking. Unkindness. Raven's always been a character who walks the line between hero and horror. As the daughter of Trigon, she's got this constant pull between her compassion and her demonic heritage. Enter the unkindness. Raven transformed into the living embodiment of anti-creation, a being so dangerous that even gods step back when she arrives. The name isn't just for show. The unkindness comes from the term for a flock of ravens, and it represents Raven merging with the darkest multiversal magic. In this form, she sheds her usual calm, quiet restraint, and becomes a towering, black-feathered avatar of destruction. Her cloak becomes a winged shroud of shadow, her eyes burn with otherworldly power, and she literally speaks with the voice of 1,000 ravens. Normal Raven can already manipulate souls, emotions, and magical energy on a terrifying level, but here she taps directly into the primal forces of the dark multiverse. She can unmake realities. At her peak, she is presented as a threat to the multiverse itself, someone who could go toe-to-toe with the Batman who laughs in the Darkest Night form. That's how high she ranks. But like a lot of DC's ultimate forms, it's not just about power, it's about tragedy. Raven becomes the unkindness because she embraces the parts of herself she spent her entire life fighting against. What if Raven stopped resisting her darkness and gave in completely? It's not some outside possession or a temporary boost, it's her unleashed. Story-wise, the unkindness adds weight to the death metal saga because it shows just how high the stakes are. When even Raven, the team's moral anchor, can flip into a reality-destroying monster, you know the DC universe is on the edge. At the same time, it also shows how powerful Raven is and how much she holds back. Of course, this form is less a permanent status quo and more a glimpse into Raven's potential, both her greatest strength and her greatest fear. We can see here that she is not just a sidekick sorceress, or the emotional one on the Teen Titans. She's a cosmic level powerhouse whose true form could rival the gods of creation and destruction. Darkseid is already one of DC's biggest threats, but true form Darkseid is on a completely different level. The important idea is that the Darkseid Superman usually fights is basically an avatar or projection of something much larger. The actual new gods exist in the sphere of the gods, outside the normal physical multiverse, where they function more like enormous cosmic archetypes than ordinary beings. True form Darkseid is essentially the embodiment of tyranny and absolute evil, the being behind the idea that Darkseid is. That's why destroying one of his bodies doesn't really accomplish much. You can beat an avatar on Earth, but the actual godhead remains untouched. One of his craziest appearances is Final Crisis. After Darkseid's physical death, his true essence fell from the sphere of the gods into the lower dimensional universe. His presence was so massive that reality itself couldn't properly contain him, creating a gravitational collapse that dragged space, time, and the different eras of existence toward oblivion. While this was happening, Darkseid possessed both Darkseid and unleashed the anti-life equation, spreading it across the internet and enslaving huge portions of humanity. His Omega powers were also taken to another level with the Omega Sanction, trapping victims in endless cycles of alternate lives and deaths, essentially turning existence itself into a form of torture. Stopping him required something far beyond punching him harder. Superman ultimately used the Miracle Machine to create a reality-altering counter-frequency capable of neutralizing Darkseid's essence. Then the post-death metal era takes the idea even further. After the multiverse was reconstructed, Darkseid's various versions and aspects were consolidated into a single, reconstituted godhead. He became an increasingly cosmic force connected to the fundamental darkness of creation and was powerful enough to wipe out the Quintessence, the council of immensely powerful cosmic beings, including the Spectre, High Father, the Wizard Shazam, Ganthet, Hera, and Phantom Stranger. His true state anti-life can also function on a much larger scale, essentially replacing individual consciousness with Darkseid's own will. So true form Darkseid is closer to a cosmic principle of tyranny that projects avatars into reality. That's why killing Darkseid isn't necessarily the same thing as killing Darkseid. The God of Death. During Justice League Darkseid War, each leaguer got a crazy divine upgrade. Batman became the God of Knowledge, Superman turned into the God of Strength, and Flash, he got one of the scariest roles of all, the God of Death. It happened when Darkseid called in the Black Racer, the new god's avatar of death, to deal with the Anti-Monitor. Problem is, the Black Racer needed the host, and in the chaos of the battle, it lashed itself to Barry Allen. Suddenly, the fastest man alive wasn't just running through time anymore, he was running with death itself at his heels. Barry fused with the Black Racer means that every step he takes is a step toward death. His classic Scarlet suit turns darker, with streaks of black and glowing yellow, and his face takes on this eerie skeletal look. He is no longer just the Scarlet Speedster, he's the Reaper in red. The speed force and the essence of death merge inside him, turning him into an avatar who can end lives as easily as he saves them. The Black Racer keeps whispering in his mind, trying to convince him that death is natural, that everything living must eventually die, and that Barry should embrace this responsibility. It even plays dirty by reminding him that his mother's death is what set him on the path to becoming the Flash. To the Racer, that's proof that death isn't just an end, it's a catalyst, and Barry should accept being the one who ushers people across that line. But Barry's a hero, and heroes don't accept everyone dies as an answer. He fights the Racer at every step, even when it shows him visions of his loved ones like Iris and tempts him to kill. Barry's defiance is what makes this story work. The idea that even with godlike powers, he refuses to stop being who he is. He tries to break free, even attempts to kill death itself by going after the Black Racer directly. Of course that backfires because death isn't something you erase. When Barry wounds the Racer, it just becomes unchained, ready to slaughter across the cosmos. And that's when Barry realizes the awful truth. The only way to contain the Racer is to stay bonded with it. If he doesn't, the Racer will tear through the universe unchecked, feeding its hunger endlessly. So Barry accepts the role of God of Death, not because he wants to, but because he has to. But staying linked to the Racer, he can guide it, keep its hunger pointed toward those whose time has actually come, rather than innocents who still have a future. It's classic Flash storytelling: sacrifice, selflessness, and carrying a burden so others don't have to. As the God of Death, Barry Allen is one of the most unsettling ultimate forms in DC. He doesn't wield this power with joy or triumph, he carries it like a curse. His speed lets him outrun everything, but here, he's forced to run side by side with death. It's powerful, tragic, and oddly fitting for a character whose whole life has been defined by outrunning fate. Hal Jordan as the Spectre. When Hal Jordan became the Spectre, it wasn't just some random crossover gimmick. It was DC trying to redeem one of their most iconic heroes after the Parallax mess. Remember, Hal went full villain during Emerald Twilight, destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, and absorbed Parallax, becoming one of DC's greatest threats. Eventually, he died a tragic hero's death in Final Night, sacrificing himself to reignite the sun. That could have been the end, but nope. DC had bigger plans. Instead of staying dead, Hal's soul was chosen to host the Spectre, God's spirit of vengeance. As the Spectre, Hal wasn't just another guy in a spooky cloak. This was him wielding biblical Judgment Day levels of powers. The Spectre can reshape reality, smite nations, and bend time if it serves vengeance. Hal brought a very human angle to this role though. Instead of being the cold, merciless hand of God, Hal tried to guide the Spectre into being more about redemption than pure punishment. He wanted forgiveness to coexist with wrath, which is fitting considering he was seeking redemption for his own sins as Parallax. That said, being the Spectre didn't come without its baggage. Hal constantly wrestled with losing himself inside this infinite divine force. The Spectre has always had a problem. The host risks getting erased, just becoming a puppet for God's vengeance. But Hal, being Hal, fought against all that. He didn't want to vanish into the cloak. He wanted to keep his humanity intact, and this created an interesting dynamic. The Spectre craving blood and vengeance, and Hal pulling back and trying to find justice and mercy. Power-wise, this was Hal at his absolute peak, outside of Parallax. He wasn't bound by a rank's charge or mortal limits. He could travel basically anywhere in DC's cosmology. He could unmake demons, bind cosmic entities, and rewrite souls. There were moments where you could argue that this version of Hal was up there with characters like the Presence's top agents, or even multiversal gods. But Hal's own guilt and need for control sometimes meant he wasn't unleashing Spectre's full potential, which made him less terrifyingly omnipotent than Jim Corrigan's Spectre, but also more layered and human. Thematically, this era was all about penance, as he was literally trying to atone for every mistake he made, from betraying his corpse to letting Parallax consume him. He carried the weight of every sin he committed, and he tried to use that role to balance the scales. Fans are split on this version. Some love the idea of Hal finding redemption as God's avatar, others felt it was too strange a detour from classic Lantern Hal, but you can't deny it made him unique. Eventually, of course, this couldn't last forever. DC needed Hal back in green tights, and Jeff Jones' Green Lantern Rebirth retconned his time as Spectre as part of Parallax's lingering possession. Still, the Spectre years gave Hal something special. He genuinely wrestled with the cost of his choices, the meaning of justice, and the difference between vengeance and forgiveness. Avatar of the Green, or God Swamp Thing. He appeared during Mark Millar and Grant Morrison's run. So after the original Parliament of Trees was destroyed by the cosmic entity known as the Word, the Parliament transferred its remaining power, memories, and life force into Alec. From there, he went beyond simply controlling plants and began mastering the fundamental forces of nature: the green, the red, the clear, the melt, and the flame. Basically plant life, animals, water, earth, and fire. At this point, Swamp Thing wasn't just a guy made of plants anymore. His consciousness could exist throughout entire ecosystems, allowing him to manifest through natural matter on an enormous scale. He could reshape Earth's environment, create forests and entire landscapes almost instantly, manipulate weather, and produce living beings from earth and plant matter. He could also manipulate biological organisms on an absurd level, changing someone's body from the inside by turning their blood into sap, drying out bodily fluids, or growing vegetation inside them. Destroying his physical body wasn't much help either, because Alec's consciousness could simply rebuild itself from whatever natural material was available. His elemental consciousness could even reach other planets, where he could terraform worlds and establish completely new ecosystems. The problem was that becoming this powerful came with a pretty huge downside. Alec was starting to lose Alec. The more he became this enormous elemental intelligence, the further he drifted away from his human emotions, his empathy, and especially his love for Abigail Arcane. He eventually realized that becoming an all-powerful force of nature wasn't worth losing the humanity that made him want to protect life in the first place. So instead of remaining a cosmic god, Swamp Thing voluntarily gave up that absolute level of power and returned the elemental forces to the natural world. Cosmic Armor Superman. This isn't your usual, stronger, shinier Superman. This guy is a literal concept built to fight threats outside of normal continuity. He shows up in Grant Morrison's Final Crisis, Superman Beyond 3D, which is already one of those comics that bends your brain. The Thought Robot is a fusion of Superman's essence and Ultraman's, his evil Earth 3 counterpart, powered by the Monitor's weaponry. Basically, the Monitors build a story-powered armor that needs a pilot, and Superman steps in. It's not just armor though, it's living narrative defense, powered by the idea of heroism itself. What makes him insane is his scale. Cosmic Armor Superman doesn't just punch harder than regular supes, he literally fights at the level of metafiction. He's aware he's in a comic book, aware of the panels, the narrator, and even the readers. He fights Mandrak, the Dark Monitor, a vampiric god who eats stories and tries to erase the entire multiverse. And Thought Robot Superman meets him on his own terms, outside time, outside continuity, in the raw fabric of story itself. We're talking punches that shake the over-Monitor's world, the page that contains all of DC Comics. His armor is made of pure story, adapting to whatever threat he faces. Because his strength comes from narrative inevitability, Superman always wins, and Thought Robot embodies that rule in its purest form. It's like if someone wrote a Superman who could survive literally any situation because he is the plot armor. Except here, that's the actual plot. And the best part, he's still Superman at the core. Even at his godlike, fourth wall shattering level, Thought Robot acts with compassion, courage, and hope. He isn't rewritten into some cold cosmic machine. When he fights Mandrak, he's still doing it for life, for people, for the chance at goodness surviving in a broken multiverse. That's what makes him resonate. It's not just Superman with infinite stats, it's Superman values weaponized on the biggest canvas imaginable. Now here's where it gets trippy. Cosmic Armor Superman is considered outside canon. He only exists to fight on the boundary of stories themselves. Once Mandrak is defeated, the armor essentially fades and Superman returns to normal within continuity. But the Thought Robot lingers as this legendary ultimate Superman, the one who can face threats no other being could even comprehend. Fans debate whether he's the strongest DC character ever, because while beings like the Presence or the Source are higher up the metaphysical chain, Thought Robot is a weapon reaching to win any battle. That makes him almost unbeatable by definition. At the end of the day, Cosmic Armor Superman is less about power scaling and more about what Superman means. He's the embodiment of the idea that no matter how dark or broken the universe gets, Superman's story always finds a way to prevail. Mandrak presents destruction, nihilism, the end of narrative itself, and Thought Robot beats him because hope and heroism are just that unshakable. Superman 1 million, aka Superman Prime. He's a fascinating and immensely powerful incarnation of the Man of Steel. Originates from the DC 1 million storyline in 1998. The storyline is set in the 853rd century, a future where Superman has lived for thousands of years due to his solar-powered longevity, which has allowed him to gain abilities far beyond those of his 20th century counterpart. So after centuries of existence, Superman Prime has undergone significant transformations due to his extended exposure to Earth's sun. His powers have evolved to extraordinary levels, including enhanced super strength, invulnerability, speed and senses, as well as new abilities such as telepathy, telekinesis, and the power to create and manipulate energy. This version of Superman has also mastered techniques from across the universe, further augmenting his abilities with advanced science and mysticism. He spent over 15,000 years in self-imposed exile inside the sun, further enhancing his powers through direct absorptions of solar energies.
Post this period, he emerges with a golden suit, symbolizing his new phase of existence. He also founded the Superman dynasty, a lineage of heroes following his ideals and protecting the universe. And in terms of capabilities, he is shown to possess the powers to resurrect the dead, create life, manipulate reality on a cosmic scale, and his power is so vast that he can easily craft entire solar systems, making him one of the most potent beings in the DC universe. He is immortal and has enough willpower to use a Green Lantern ring, and can even share a portion of his power with his descendants. Overall, this version of Superman represents the epitome of Superman's enduring legacy as a hero, and with almost no weaknesses to counter his strengths, Superman 1,000,000 is close to unstoppable.
Shazam normally gets his power from the classic six figures behind his name, but Billy has reached some high levels when DC's cosmic events start messing with the magic system. The first major one is God of Magic Shazam during Darkseid War, when the conflict between Darkseid and the Anti-Monitor disrupts Billy's connection to his original pantheon. The wizard Shazam gives him a completely new set of divine sources, giving Billy access to destruction, fire, death, war, primordial lightning, invulnerability, and most importantly, a direct connection to the source of magic through the Rock of Eternity. At this point, his magic isn't just making him stronger, it lets him manipulate magic at a much more fundamental level. Shiva's power massively boosts his destructive output, Ronmer adds fire and telepathic abilities, so instead of simply throwing magical lightning at someone, Billy can interfere with spells, bypass magical defenses, and draw from the central reservoir that helps maintain magic throughout the DC universe. He can also unleash enough power to tear through armies of new gods and other high-level cosmic threats during Darkseid War.